You wake up this morning, your alarm goes off, you reach over to silence it, and something feels wrong. Your arm doesn't feel like yours. You look down and it's not. It's someone else's arm, someone else's hand. And as you sit there in that moment of pure panic, memories start flooding in. Memories that aren't yours, a childhood you never lived, a person you never were, and you realize something terrifying. You're trapped inside someone else's mind, and they might be trapped inside yours. This scenario seems impossible, but what would actually happen if you woke up with someone else's memories? Because the answer is far stranger than you might think. First, let's be clear about what would happen in the immediate moment. You wouldn't lose your own memories. That's the terrifying part. You'd have both. You'd be standing in a room that looks unfamiliar but feels like home to this other person. You'd see photos on the walls of a family that isn't yours, but you'd somehow know all their names. You'd have an impulse to call someone you've never met. You'd remember events that happened to someone else as if you lived them. And here's where it gets really interesting. You'd probably think you were losing your mind. That's the obvious first response. But what you'd actually be experiencing is something psychologists call source confusion. Your brain normally keeps memories organized by where they came from, your life, things you saw, things you experienced directly. But suddenly, your brain would have memories from someone else's direct experience mixed in with your own. The neural pathways wouldn't match up. Your brain would be screaming at you that something is catastrophically wrong. Within the first few hours, panic would set in, not just from the memories themselves, but from the inability to function. You wouldn't know your own password. You wouldn't remember your own job. Someone might show you a photo of your spouse and you wouldn't recognize them, because in your mind, or rather in this new person's mind living inside you, your spouse is someone completely different. This isn't like amnesia, it's worse. It's having two complete contradictory identities trying to occupy the same consciousness. But here's what most people get wrong about this scenario. It's not that you'd lose yourself. What would actually happen is that you'd have an identity crisis that makes every identity crisis in human history look trivial. Because your sense of self, your personality, your entire sense of who you are, that's built on your memories. It's built on your personal history. Remove that and replace it with someone else's, and you don't just lose your memories, you lose you. Neuroscientists have studied patients who've lost specific memories due to brain damage, and the pattern is clear. When someone loses their autobiographical memories, the story they tell themselves about who they are, they don't just forget facts, they lose their personality. They become someone different. A patient who lost memories due to trauma might wake up with a completely different temperament. Shy people become outgoing. Cautious people become reckless, because the memories aren't just files stored in your brain. They're the building blocks of every decision you make, every preference you have, every personality trait you express. So if you woke up with someone else's memories, you'd still be in your body. You'd still have your own neural hardware, but the software, the identity, the personality, the self, that would be partially rewritten. You'd be a hybrid. You'd be neither fully yourself nor fully the person whose memories you acquired. Now, imagine the practical nightmare. You'd have to convince people you've been replaced somehow, without sounding insane. Your family would be horrified. They'd recognize your face, your voice, your body, but you wouldn't know their names. You wouldn't remember shared moments that shaped your relationship. A parent might try to comfort you by reminding you of a childhood memory, and you'd have no idea what they're talking about. From their perspective, you'd seem like a stranger wearing a mask of your own face. And here's where it gets darker. What if the person whose memories you got woke up with yours? What if right now, somewhere else in the world, they're experiencing the exact same thing? They're looking at your family photos with no emotional connection. They're trying to navigate your life, your relationships, your responsibilities. They're going to make mistakes. They might say something offensive without realizing it. They might accidentally destroy relationships you've spent years building, and there's nothing you can do about it because you're trapped in this new life trying to figure out who you've become. The human brain is not equipped to handle this. We've never evolved to deal with imported memories. We've never needed to process a completely different personal history. Your brain would be in constant conflict. The memories from your actual life would fight with these new memories for dominance. Neurotransmitters would get confused. Your sense of time would shatter. You might remember events from the other person's life with crystal clarity, but when someone asks you where you were yesterday, you wouldn't know if they're asking about yesterday in your life or yesterday in theirs. But maybe the most terrifying part isn't the practical disaster, it's the philosophical one. If you woke up with someone else's memories, would you still be you? That's the real question, and the honest answer from neuroscience is no, not entirely. You'd be someone new, a merger of identities that shouldn't exist, a consciousness that was never meant to form. There are actually people who've experienced something close to this, patients with dissociative identity disorder who have fragmented memories from different trauma responses, and they don't describe it as having two sets of memories. They describe it as not knowing who they are. They describe it as being lost, and they only have fragments of different experiences, not complete alternate memories. A full swap would be infinitely worse. So the real answer to the question is this. If you woke up with someone else's memories, you wouldn't just be confused. You wouldn't just face practical problems. You would cease to exist in any meaningful way. Not because your body would die, but because you would stop being you. And the worst part, the person looking back at you in the mirror might seem normal to everyone else. They might seem fine, but inside you'd be screaming, and nobody would ever know that the person they're talking to isn't you anymore. The only thing worse than waking up as someone else would be waking up as yourself, but being unable to prove it to anyone who matters.